remember the exact moment when the truth slipped out of hiding. It was a Tuesday morning, quiet and ordinary, the kind of morning that should have passed without notice. But as I bent over the sink, I saw it a single strand of blonde hair caught in the drain, long, golden, and out of place. My hands froze. My breath caught. I have silver hair, every inch of it earned over 68 years. Franklin's late wife was a brunette. There was no reason for blonde hair to be in my bathroom unless someone else had been there. It was such a small thing, so fragile between my fingers, yet it felt heavier than any stone. I turned it over in my hand, and in that instant, suspicion rooted itself deep inside me. 16 years of widowhood had taught me loneliness, and Franklin Garrett had been the answer to that silence. He was supposed to be my companion, my comfort. But in that moment, with that strand of hair glinting under the light, I realized comfort can be nothing more than a mask for betrayal. I slipped the hair into a tissue, pressing it flat like evidence I couldn't ignore. My pulse thudded in my ears, but my face remained calm. Outwardly, I carried on with the morning as though nothing had happened. Inside, though, something sharp had awakened a mix of grief, anger, and a quiet determination. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I planned. That was the morning suspicion became my shadow, and the thought of revenge began to simmer quietly at the edges of my mind. To understand how deep this cut went, you need to know who Franklin was to me and who I was before that blonde hair changed everything. For 16 years, my life had been quiet. After losing my husband Robert, I thought the rest of my years would be spent in silence, just me, my little house, and the faint echo of a life that had once been full. I had adjusted to widowhood the way you learn to live with an old injury tender in certain places, but manageable with time. The days blurred together in gentle repetition: mornings with coffee at the kitchen table, afternoons in the garden, evenings with books stacked by my bedside. Then Franklin Garrett appeared, a retired engineer, steady and polite, with that kind of old-fashioned charm you don't see much anymore. We met through the Senior Center's book club, and what started as casual conversations about mystery novels grew into shared dinners, Sunday crossword puzzles, and eventually, the quiet companionship of two people who had both buried their first great loves. Franklin wasn't fireworks. He was more like a warm lamp on a cold night, steady and comforting. For a woman who thought her days of romance had long passed, it felt like a second chance I hadn't expected. Dorothy Miller had been there through it all. For 40 years. She was more than a friend. She was my sister in every way except blood. We raised our kids side by side, buried our husbands within 2 years of each other, and leaned on each other through every storm life sent our way. Dorothy was the one who nudged me toward Franklin, encouraging me not to give up on love. She was also the person I trusted with every secret, every worry, every laugh. If Robert had been my anchor, Dorothy had always been my sail. Between Franklin and Dorothy, I felt held. My days had shape again. Tuesdays were for Franklin's golf outings, after which he'd bring groceries and sit across from me at the table, complaining about his game while I worked on my crossword. Thursdays were often lunch with Dorothy at the little diner downtown, two women trading stories about children, neighbors, and the strange turns of aging. We had reached a stage in life where routines were precious. There was comfort in knowing where the day would take me and who would be standing beside me. Looking back, I think that's why the betrayal cut so deeply. It wasn't just that Franklin was part of my life. It was that Dorothy was, too. Between the two of them, I thought I had rebuilt the life I had lost when Robert passed. Love, trust, friendship, it was all there, or at least it seemed to be. But sometimes, the most painful truths slip quietly into your world. Sometimes, it's not a storm that shakes everything apart. It's something small, unexpected, and impossible to ignore. And for me, it all began with something as delicate as a strand of hair. Tuesday mornings were usually the same. Franklin would head out early for his golf game, kiss me lightly on the cheek, and promise to pick up a few things on his way back. I'd linger in the kitchen, humming some tune from the 50s while tidying up, before moving on to the bathroom to tackle the little chores that always seemed to fall to me. That morning felt no different ordinary, almost soothing in its predictability. The shower drain had been clogging again, something Franklin had been meaning to fix for weeks but never got around to. With a sigh, I rolled up my sleeves, grabbed a tissue, and bent down to pull out the mess. At first, it was the usual soap residue, a clump of my own silver strands, brittle and wiry from age. But then, my fingers caught something else, something that did not belong to me. It was a single strand at first, then another, tangled among the rest. Long, golden, impossibly smooth, blonde. I froze, holding it up to the light. My own hair had been silver for years. Franklin's late wife had been a brunette until the day she died. There was no reason, no possible explanation, for a blonde hair to be caught in our drain. It glowed in the bathroom light, almost mocking me, delicate but damning. For a moment, I felt dizzy. The room tilted, and I had to steady myself against the counter. Then came the rush of emotions, each one sharper than the last. First curiosity, then disbelief, then the burn of betrayal spreading through my chest. At 68, I thought I was beyond this, too old for heartbreak, too wise for deception. But there it was, undeniable. I folded the strand of hair carefully into a tissue and slipped it into my jewelry box, tucking it right beside the wedding ring Robert had given me decades ago. 2 pieces of evidence from 2 different betrayals, resting side by side. The gesture was quiet, almost ritualistic, but it steadied me. I wasn't going to confront Franklin, not yet. I would watch. I would wait. And so I began to study him like a stranger. His expressions at dinner, the way his eyes darted to his phone a little too often, the restless pacing when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Franklin, once so comfortable in our routines, suddenly seemed unsettled, distracted. I told myself I could be imagining it, that perhaps the hair had some innocent explanation. But deep down, I knew. My instincts had rarely been wrong. The first real crack came that same evening, over steak and vegetables. Franklin mentioned Dorothy. He said she had looked tired when he saw her at the grocery store, that she was probably overworked at the flower shop. It should have been nothing, a passing comment about a mutual friend. But the way he said her name lingered. Too gentle, too familiar. His fork cut through his food with unusual precision, his voice a little too deliberate. Dorothy, my friend of 40 years. The thought lodged itself in my mind, refusing to leave. I replayed Franklin's tone, his expression, the faint clench of his jaw. Suddenly, that blonde hair wasn't just evidence of some faceless woman. It had a possibility attached, a face I knew as well as my own. I didn't say anything. I smiled, I nodded, I played along, but my heart was pounding in my ears. The suspicion had shifted into something sharper, a question that demanded an answer. The next step was clear. I would need to see Dorothy, face to face, and I would know. I invited Dorothy to lunch that Thursday, choosing the small cafe downtown where we had shared countless meals over the years. It was familiar ground, neutral territory. I told myself it would be like old times, two friends catching up. But the moment she walked through the door, I knew those days were gone. Dorothy had changed. Her hair, once a soft chestnut streaked with gray, now shone a striking shade of blonde. It wasn't subtle. It was deliberate, bold, the kind of change women make when they want to be noticed. Her skin looked fresher too, as if she had found some new cream or treatment. She carried herself with a lightness I hadn't seen in years, almost a glow. To anyone else, it might have looked like happiness. To me, it looked like betrayal. I watched her settle into the chair across from me, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of the menu. She avoided my eyes, speaking too quickly, filling the silence with chatter about the flower shop, the weather, the rising cost of groceries. It all sounded like noise, a rehearsed performance to keep me from looking too closely. But I was already seeing everything. When I asked about her new look, she brushed it off, saying she needed a change. Her voice cracked ever so slightly, her smile too tight. I let her words hang there, studying the way she sipped her coffee, the way her hand trembled as she set the cup back down. The Dorothy I had known for 40 years had always been steady, confident, open. This woman in front of me was restless, guarded, hiding. The more she spoke, the more certain I became. She never mentioned Franklin by name, but she didn't have to. It was in the way she flinched when I casually said I had been spending more time with him lately. It was in her forced laugh, brittle and sharp, when I teased about men still noticing women our age. She was defensive, almost desperate, as if every word carried the risk of exposing her. Inside, I felt something shatter. Dorothy had been with me through births, funerals, sleepless nights, and endless cups of tea. She was the sister I had chosen when life had left me alone. And now, she was the one stealing from me, the one betraying me with the man I had trusted to ease my loneliness. I smiled through the meal, nodding at her stories, tasting none of the food. On the surface, it was polite conversation, two old friends sharing lunch. But underneath, it was an interrogation. Every question carefully chosen, every silence weighted, and though she never confessed, I left the cafe certain of the truth. As I walked back to my car, the blonde hair in my jewelry box came back to mind, glowing like a warning. I had confirmation now, not in words, but in everything she couldn't hide. The betrayal was real, and it cut deeper than I could have imagined. By the time I turned the key in the ignition, the decision was already forming. Quiet, deliberate, unshakable. If they thought they could deceive me, they had underestimated the wrong woman. I remember standing in the pharmacy aisle, staring at the shelves stacked with creams and bottles. My heart was pounding, though I kept my face calm, as if I were just another woman buying toothpaste. My fingers closed around the small tube of hair removal cream, and I slipped it into my basket along with a loaf of bread and some vitamins. A secret tucked between ordinary things. Back home, I set the plan in motion. Franklin had always been proud of his thick, silver-streaked hair, and his shampoo was something he treated like liquid gold. Replacing it felt almost surgical. I poured just enough of the cream into the bottle, stirred it carefully, then placed it back exactly where it belonged. The bottle looked untouched, but now It held the seed of my revenge. The first time he showered, nothing happened. He came out humming, toweling his hair dry, none the wiser. I kept my smile soft, my voice steady, but inside, I waited. Patience was part of the punishment. By the third shower, I noticed the first strands clinging to his brush. A few at first, nothing alarming. He muttered about shedding, and I tilted my head, suggesting maybe stress was catching up to him. My tone was sympathetic, but my heart drummed with satisfaction. Soon, the changes were undeniable. Small, bald patches appeared near his temples, then spread across his scalp in uneven circles. His vanity turned to panic. He rubbed his head in disbelief, staring into the mirror as if it had betrayed him too. He blamed stress, age, bad luck, anything but me. And I played along, touching his shoulder gently, telling him guilt can weigh on a man until it shows on the outside. Watching him unravel gave me a strange peace. It wasn't joy. Exactly, it was the quiet balance of justice tipping back in my favor. But I knew this was only the beginning. A few missing hairs would never be enough. The true reckoning would come when all the players sat at the same table. And that chance was waiting, just around the corner, at brunch. Dorothy's invitation had come a week earlier, a cheerful phone call about wanting to share something exciting. I had smiled into the receiver, though my heart was already preparing for war. That Sunday morning, I pressed my dress flat, put on my pearls, and walked out of the house with the calm of a woman carrying a secret weapon. Franklin trailed behind me, hat pulled low, the brim shadowing the uneven bald patches that had bloomed across his scalp. The drive was quiet. His hands gripped the wheel tighter than usual, and every so often I caught him glancing at himself in the rearview mirror. The once proud man now shrank behind a hat, hiding from the world, hiding from me, hiding from her. Dorothy's home smelled of fresh flowers and cinnamon rolls. She greeted us at the door with her new golden blonde hair catching the light like spun straw. She looked younger, brighter, too bright for a woman her age. My heart twisted at the sight. For a moment, I remembered our years of laughter, our confidences, our sisterhood. And then I remembered the hair in my drain. Franklin lingered in the doorway, reluctant to take off his hat. Dorothy's eyes darted toward him, her smile faltering for the briefest second as she noticed what he was hiding. I didn't miss that flicker, and I didn't let it pass unnoticed. We sat at her polished oak table, the three of us around steaming plates of eggs and fruit. Dorothy began with small talk, her voice too high, her laugh too forced. I watched her closely, every nervous glance, every fidget. Franklin avoided my eyes entirely, fussing with his napkin as though it might shield him from judgment. When Dorothy finally began to speak about her exciting news, I leaned back, folded my hands, and let silence hang between us until she squirmed. I asked softly if her new look had anything to do with this news. Her cheeks flushed pink, and she stumbled over her words. Franklin's fork clattered against his plate. I tilted my head toward him, remarking how stress seems to leave its mark on a man, sometimes even on his hair. Dorothy's face drained of color as her gaze slid to Franklin's hat. He froze, caught between shame and fear. Then I mentioned finding something curious in my drain not long ago. A single blonde strand. Not mine, not Franklin's late wife's. I let the words hang heavy in the air, like smoke filling the room. Dorothy's hands trembled as she reached for her glass of orange juice. Franklin's shoulders slumped, defeated, as though the weight of the truth had finally broken him. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need accusations or tears. The silence between us was louder than any screaming could have been. They both knew, and they both knew I knew. I rose slowly, smoothing my dress, and told them I hoped the brunch was everything they dreamed it would be. My voice was steady, sharp, final. I walked out with my head high, leaving them in the ruins of their own making. The air outside was crisp, and with every step back to my car, I felt the power shift. But power always comes with a cost, and I wondered what truth would surface next, once the silence gave way to aftermath. The silence after I left the table was deafening, but of course, they couldn't leave it there. Franklin stumbled after me first, tugging at his hat, his eyes wide with panic. His words spilled out in fragments, excuses about timing, about loneliness, about things I supposedly misunderstood. But every word felt thin, like tissue paper stretched too far. Behind him, Dorothy followed, her face pale beneath her golden hair, insisting it hadn't meant to happen this way, that I was still her friend. Hearing her call me that word stung more than anything. I listened without interruption. Their voices overlapped, each desperate to rewrite the truth into something softer, something forgivable. But betrayal doesn't soften, it sharpens. And in their scrambling, I saw them more clearly than ever. Two people who had traded honesty for selfishness, comfort for cowardice. I told them there was nothing left to explain. My heart had already heard the truth long before their lips tried to shape it. Franklin's patchy scalp glistened under the hallway light, and I couldn't help but think how fitting it was. His vanity stripped bare. His secrets no longer hidden. Dorothy's hands trembled against her pearls. The same ones she used to brag about when we were girls, as if clinging to jewelry could disguise the hollowness beneath. What surprised me most was the calm that settled over me. Anger had burned away, leaving something steadier. I wasn't broken. I wasn't even furious anymore. I was free. I turned from them, my voice steady, telling them they could have each other if that's what they wanted, but I would no longer stand in the shadows of their lies. Their betrayal was theirs to carry now, not mine. As I walked toward the door, I felt lighter, almost relieved. Franklin's panic and Dorothy's humiliation trailed behind me, echoes of a story already finished. And in that quiet moment, I understood something deeper about love, loyalty, and the price of trust. But closure isn't just about endings, it's about what comes after. And that final truth would come to me only when I stepped fully into reflection. In the quiet that followed, I realized something important. Betrayal doesn't define me. It wounds, yes, but it doesn't take away my worth. Franklin and Dorothy chose lies over loyalty, but their choices don't have the power to erase my dignity. I walked away with my head high, and that was the greatest victory of all. I learned that revenge isn't about tearing others down. For me, it was about reclaiming my own strength, reminding myself that I am not powerless. Watching Franklin's vanity crumble was less about punishment and more about balance, and leaving Dorothy to sit in her own shame wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. Sometimes, the deepest lesson in betrayal is this: the people we trust most can fail us, but we are still whole. We can grieve, we can rage, and then we can rise again, stronger, wiser, untouchable. If you've ever been betrayed, remember this: you get to choose how the story ends, not them, you. And if my story touched something in you, I hope you'll take a moment to like, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments. After all, The more we share, the stronger we all become.